Hello, BookTube. Well, we come to it at last, the end of our 2019 reread of the Iliad. I read the Iliad every year in June, and I never imagined in the 30 or 40 or 50 years that I did that, I never imagined there would be such a thing as BookTube, or that I might be able to read it with company of people that I've never met and I'm never going to meet. How weird is that? How strange the future is to be living in it. And we get now to the last quarter of the poem, and we, much like with the Prime Minister, the Trollope read-along that I'm doing on this channel, last time around, the linchpin of the work of art really happened, because Achilles' friend Patroclus was killed by Hector, and this caused Achilles to re-enter the war, and that is the downfall of Troy. That is the end of the story. That is certainly the end of Hector, guaranteed. And we know that ahead of time. There are, in this case, it's not the same. It's not, legitimate in some ways to compare this to a novel, because when Trollope was writing the Prime Minister, his readers did not know what was coming. Even in a Trollope novel, they couldn't be sure what was coming in the fourth act. Whereas with Homer, every member of the audience knew every bit of this story, not just the parts that are in this poem, but the parts that aren't in this poem. But that's what we have to deal with this time around. In this final quarter of the book, we deal with the death of Hector and the funeral games of Patroclus, and that's it. That the Iliad is not the Trojan War, and the end of the Iliad is not the end of the Trojan War. So there's a long story left to go. Many writers in antiquity did that story. My favorite of them being Quintus of Smyrna, who did a book called After Troy, a book, after the Iliad ends, he takes the story up again, and it's really good. I wish that Quintus of Smyrna were better known, but this story, what's left from this point out, is heartbreak, and I don't think it's wrong to say that. It's not tragic because Achilles isn't the one dying, but it is heartbreaking, because I don't think the people who wrote this poem, the groups, the anonymous groups of bards that eventually codified this story, and maybe the anonymous groups of scribes who wrote it down, all of the vast number of people and voices that we use the name Homer to include, I don't think the sentiment that those people had, the sentiment that is in this poem, wants you to feel anything but heartbreak at this. Even though this is a Greek poem, the Greeks are not admirable. They act from petty motives, from malice, from wounded love, from greed. They have night raids. They are not honorable, and they're also not completely unbeatable in war. They're not completely valiant either. Whereas the Trojans, we've seen them in a far better light. They seem, aside from Prince Paris, they seem genuinely more noble. We've seen their personal lives, their home lives. We certainly haven't had that opportunity with the Greeks. And we've also come to admire Hector, their greatest warrior. And we know what's coming now, or at least the original listeners to this poem would have known what was coming. When Achilles re-enters the war because Hector has killed Patroclus, we know what's coming. We know that Nemesis is coming for Hector. He cannot possibly live, and he doesn't. He doesn't live. And Homer is pitiless to him before the end. He is before the walls of Troy, and he's alone. And he's thinking to himself. And Homer gives us a very good, in that moment, gives us a very good glimpse of the thoughts going through his head. The thoughts going through the head of a really good fighter caught in such a horrible moment. He has just been pleaded to by his father on the high wall of Troy to give this up, save yourself. I've lost enough sons here. I don't want to lose anyone else. He's also been pleaded to by his mother, who shows him her breast, where he suckled. And now he has thoughts of his own. This is in the Fitzgerald translation. I used to love the Fitzgerald translation. I used to read it all the time. And I've been reading it this time around, and really enjoying some parts of it. So there are some affectations in this translation that I don't like, and I don't think I ever will like, and I like them less with every passing year. But all in all, I'm happy to have stuck with one translation this time around, and I'm happy to have picked the Fitzgerald. And he he gives us a glimpse into Hector's thoughts. It's not pretty. We were going to suffer through this before the end. He says, "Here I am badly caught." This is the Fitzgerald version of this. "Here I am badly caught. If I take cover, slipping inside the gate and wall, the first to accuse me of it will be Polydamas, who told me I should lead the Trojans back to the city on that cursed night Achilles joined the battle. No, I would not, wiser though it would have been. Now troops have perished for my foolish pride. I am ashamed to face townsmen and women. Someone inferior to me will say, he kept his pride and lost his men, this Hector. So it will go. Better when the time comes that I appear as he who killed Achilles man to man, or else that I went down before him honorably for the city's sake. Suppose, though, that I lay my shield and helm aside, and prop my spear against the wall, and go to meet the noble Prince Achilles, promising with her all the treasure that Alexandros, that's Prince Paris, brought home by ship to Troy, the first cause of our quarrel, that he might give these things to the Atreidai, that is Menelaus, who was Helen's husband, the wounded party, and his brother Agamemnon, the high king of the Greeks. Then I might add, apart from these, a portion of all the secret wealth the city owns. Yes, later I might take our counselors' oaths to hide no stores, but share and share alike, to have all the wealth our lovely city holds, all that is here within the walls. Ah, no, why do I even put these questions to myself? I must not go before him and receive no quarter, no respect. Aye, then and there he'll kill me, unprotected as I am, my gear laid by, defenseless as a woman. No chance now for charms from oak or stone in parley with him, charms a girl and boy might use when they enchant each other talking. Better we duel now at once, and see to whom the Olympian awards the glory. And there's a moment, just a brief moment, where Zeus, the Olympian he's talking about, the king of the gods, wants to do something. He's lamenting the fact that Hector is running from Achilles around the walls of Troy. He thinks, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be lovely? And he's sternly reminded by his daughter that you must not do that. And he knows that. He is not going to interfere. She then interferes. Minerva goes down to the plain of Troy and convinces Hector that he is not alone. She takes on the form of his brother, so that Hector gains a modicum of courage sufficient to turn on his heel and stop running and face Achilles. And when it comes to it, in the last moment of trial, the illusion vanishes and he realizes the gods want me dead. It's not just enough for them to favor this monster who's killed so many Trojans. They are also now actively tricking me. They want me dead, and so I will die. And he does. He begs Achilles a couple of times to afford him an honorable burial. Achilles absolutely refuses because Achilles is a monster. And then he dies. Hector dies. And with him dies the Iliad. In a real way. I mean, the narrative tension went out when Patroclus died and Achilles re-enters the war. It was the big thing hanging over the whole thing. You had this tide-turning force that was in abeyance. The minute that force enters the narrative, things change, and you know they will, and they'll be inevitable in their change. But what follows is funerary. I mean, the Greeks all take their turns mocking Hector's dead body, saying, he doesn't look so tough now, and stabbing it over and over again, just stabbing at each one of them. And then Achilles drags the dead body around the walls of Troy by its ankles over and over again. The gods step in to protect the body from rot and destruction, so it stays pure. And the very end of the poem, the part that we're reading today, is mostly what happens afterward. It mostly concerns dead bodies. King Priam leaves Troy and goes to the Greek camp to beg Achilles in person for his son's body back for a proper burial. And also, Patroclus is given elaborate funeral games that are elaborately described. And that's it. That is the end of the Iliad for this time around. And, of course, I have a million questions for all of you, especially those of you who are doing this read-along. What have you been making, especially if you've been rereading it? I'm hoping that you're seeing the worth in rereading things like this by having huge chunks of things, huge strands of things, huge emphases of things jump out at you, not just because you missed them the first time, but because your reading mind has changed in the meantime. So I'd love to hear about all that. This is the end of the Iliad is always a bit of a downer, especially if, like me and like most people, you were rooting for Hector. But I also want to know, especially those of you who maybe encountered the story first through literary adaptations. There was a literary adaptation of that embassy of King Priam to the Greek camp, for instance. There was very famously a literary adaptation by Madeline Miller of the love of Patroclus for Achilles and his death. If you encountered it first in that means, then what was it like reading the poem? And if you're reading the poem for the first or second or third time or whatever, I'd love to hear your impressions. I want to thank you all for going through this Iliad reread with me. What an amazing treat to do that. And we will do it next year. We will go through the Iliad next June. I will read it anyway. If between then and now we decide that I can read it on my own without you, and that you don't want to do a read along of the Iliad, then fine, we can do other things. But in the meantime, we're going to wrap this up. That was our 2019 read of the Iliad. So let me know what you made of it, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.